When everything is aligned, then things will become a lot more clear for you. When things are off, your health can be freaking phenomenal. You can look kick ass. You will walk into a room and be like, oh my God, that girl's ripped. And cool, that's awesome. But what they don't see is your mind. Where's your mind at? Where is it just down in the dumps? Are you not sure why? Are you battling depression? Are you battling anxiety? What's going on there? Where's your spirituality at? What do you truly believe in? Truly, truly. Because I thought I believed in Christianity 1000%, right? But I was just like, for me, and hopefully this doesn't trigger anyone, but for me, like, I don't believe in the Bible 100%. And now it's been a thing for me, and it's been a struggle for me. And I had to dive into that rather than just kind of, I'll just push it aside. I'll keep attending church. I'll keep doing these things that, I don't necessarily resonate with me anymore. And that's okay. So getting that aligned was really important for me.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going really well. The sun is out. It rained this weekend, so pollen has disappeared for the most part, which is awesome because it's not covered in yellow everywhere.
Yeah, I can't say the same for here.
Yeah, and you're in Texas?
Yeah, I'm in Texas. I'm in Houston.
Yeah, do you guys have pollen issues out there?
We have a lot of pollen. There's actually like a TikTok video of a dude who just like seriously walks out and he's just like covered in yellow after he goes out for like 2 seconds. Just like, yeah.
That sounds like us golfing yesterday. We just I looked back on the fairway and there's just these clouds of just green, yellow blowing from the trees. And it's just, we were covered. I came home and just stripped all of my clothes off into like a plastic bag and then jumped straight in the shower.
Yeah, that it's funny like to see like the car, like when you've like just parked for literally 5 minutes and it's covered. And you're like, what happened?
Yeah, I keep putting off washing my car because of that. And it rained this weekend, like I said. So it looks like I'm like looking out at my car out the window and it's like, oh, like I actually see the color of it. Maybe I'll get it washed soon. But I'm just waiting a couple more days to see if there's another wave of pollen, but who knows?
Yeah, yep. It's what's funny is like everyone has like the symptoms, right? And they're like, oh my God, do I have COVID or do I have allergies? I don't know. It's a fun toss up.
Yeah, I don't know if that's fun. I don't have issues with allergies, so it's all good for me. But my
Yeah,
girlfriend,
likewise.
Jackie, she's destroyed with them. And I just got to work with my functional medicine doctor, helping her out with some hormonal things, which I know you and I will probably talk about. Which actually, I
Yeah.
want to connect her with you at some point, just maybe just chit chat about things because she's working through a lot of the similar things I see you post about. And I think she follows you as well. I've referred her to your account just to check out because I think one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast is you have an interesting mind and perspective on a lot of these topics. You have very, I'd say, undogmatic, if that's a good way of putting it, approaches, because we met in the keto space, the keto community, but I know you're not all in on keto forever for everyone, and you actually do a lot of experimentation, which I know we'll talk about that soon. So yeah, with that being said, I just appreciate everything that you represent, and that's why I wanted to talk with you and pick your brain and talk about more of the gray area of all that is Stephanie Foster.
Yeah, I would love to dive into it. A lot of gray area.
Yeah,
Definitely
for
not
sure.
black and white with this one.
No. So, like I said, we met because of the keto community, which you and I both have I'd say we've acquired a lot of value from a ketogenic approach. The lifestyle, the community is profound with support. I have yet to see, I mean, there's been some, but I've yet to see a large amount of negativity within the keto space as far as like the keto police, things like that, of course, outsiders. But for the most part, it's been a fabulous and beautiful support network. And that's been my experience. And just want to kind of gauge like your perspective on your experience with that before we move into some other things.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful community, and they welcomed me with open arms. I met you through Ryan, Dr. Ryan Lowry, and I went to the Metabolic Health Summit. I think it was 2019. My years are running together.
Yeah.
So, but I just was pretty much like, I hate to say a nobody, but a nobody at the same time. Like no one really knew me, and I was just a baby coach, and I was just starting out. I hadn't even like gotten my LLC just yet, but I just wanted to fully dive in. And everybody, it was like I knew everyone, and they just welcomed me with open arms. But at the same time, what's really neat is that, you know, they provide a lot of value and they're open to sharing. And it's not like this protective, like, oh, there's a keto coach and there's a keto coach. It's like everyone just shares value amongst each other, and they welcome open perspectives, as long as, you know, obviously, you know, backed a little bit by science would be great. But, you know, anecdotal or whatever stories, it's a very supportive community. Even so, I'm noticing too on Clubhouse, and I think you were on Clubhouse, and there's a lot of rooms there that I'm involved with, and people are very open to hearing the other side, which we're not used to with keto, in terms of like adding carbs in, and oh my God. And so that's something that I'm really pleasantly happy and surprised to hear, that people are just more open to that than they used to be.
100%. And I know metabolic flexibility is one of our topics today, which you and I are both big proponents of. And I love that. I think that's the ultimate goal for the majority, I'd say. And we're going to dive into that. But backing up to Metabolic Health Summit 2019, I believe that was the first time we met in person, right? I was thinking about this earlier and I was trying to place it.
Yep. Yep.
Because I
That's
remember
when
we
we
also
met.
were eating a bunch of barbecue together as well.
Yeah. It's the best way to do it.
Yep. Was that your first Metabolic Health Summit event that you attended?
Yeah, that
Okay,
was my
cool.
first event. That's when
Same.
I met everybody, and then just kind of went from there.
Yep. Yeah, that was the same experience I had, because and I think we were talking about the community being so supportive, and you meet people online and you connect with them, you follow their work, and you meet in person. It's like, oh, I feel like I've known you, but like we're just meeting, and it's a really cool experience. And yeah, that makes sense. I was like, I think that's where we first met, but I'm the lines get blurred because we're still, watching from afar before we meet and after. So it's like where, and did you go to MHS in 2020 as well? I remember seeing you there
Yeah,
because we
thank
took a
God.
photo, I think, together,
Yes.
a big group of us, right?
Yeah, right before this whole shindig went down, and then, you know, we haven't seen each other in a while. And you know, those events, I really miss them, because that's when you really feel the love, right? That's when you feel the love and support of everybody. It's just like seeing those smiling faces, and then like hugging people and connecting with people. I mean, yeah, you can do so much on Instagram, and that's how, like, it's so funny. It's like, oh, I feel like I know you've seen you forever, or I follow you on Instagram. So you've like, it feels like time really hasn't passed by, but it has. It's kind of like this weird gray
Yep.
area.
Yeah, and it's funny because 2020 seemed to be like this blur of a year. Or I remember what was it? I got back actually from Ryan's lab March 12th to North Carolina. March 14th is when everything kicked in, like stay home, all this stuff. And it was just like, I was like, oh yeah, 30 days. I remember talking to Jackie, like, oh, 30 days. Like, yeah, I mean, my life doesn't change much, except I had so many flights scheduled. I was like, I'm just going to be home more than I'm usually not. So my life didn't really change until the gym started shutting down. I picked up bowling again after 16 years. Like the bowling center started shutting down. And it was just like, oh, and then it just became like, it's been a year. Last month was a year. And it's like, where did the time go? So everything I reflect on in the past, it's like 2020 and 2019 become like 1 year. And I'm like, oh, it's been over a year since I see my mom. Like, interesting. Okay. So
Yeah, it's been such a blur. And but you know, it's crazy to like think back how much has happened. Even like personally for me, there's been so much that has happened within just a year. And I'm sure for everybody can say the same. It's definitely been an unexpected year, but depending on what lens you look at it through, it was a great year.
yeah, that's a perfect place to go. And I love like the last few episodes I've been recording with different people. It's like you said, it depends on the lens. And I see 2020, any obstacle really, like there's two types of people that are going to look to see like, what's the positive learning here? What can I gain from this? And those that are going to look at this as a hindrance, and they're going to maybe fall into their comfort zone even deeper than they were trying to get out before, or things like that. So they're going to look at it as like a limit. So with 2020, how did you view that maybe at the beginning, and how did it transition, or just all the above? Like what was 2020 like for you when it started back with the, stay-at-home orders back in March, and then where you are today?
Yeah, so 2020, I mean, it was definitely a mirror. I think a lot of the times everybody is so busy and you're so on the go and you're so involved in your own stuff that you really don't realize, you don't take the time to actually go inwards and see what's going on there. And I think for a lot of us, it really started to bubble up to the surface, and it made a lot of people uncomfortable because they don't know how to deal with that. right? They use either work, or they use working out, or they use whatever type of coping mechanisms to kind of escape their inner reality. And for me, it's not really so much the case. But there were some truths of mine that came out for me that I didn't really realize, that I just was trying to fit myself into, I was square peg into a round hole, and it wasn't working. And I didn't really understand why. And I started diving into that a little bit more. I even started dabbling, or not dabbling, but just doing psychedelics as well, to kind of really go inwards and see, and use that as a form of therapy, because my old story was depression and anxiety, and that's something that I definitely was I definitely faced that this past year. And had I not had that year, I would not have taken the time or even explored different options as to, okay, what does this look like, or why is this happening, or why am I playing this old story, this old pattern in my mind? Why am I still believing it? This is a history. This is not, doesn't have to be necessarily today or tomorrow. And I think 2020 was a lot of that for everybody. And then it just really depends. Do you look at it from a victim mentality, or do you look at it as an opportunity for growth? And for me, I definitely use that as an opportunity of growth and to pivot in certain aspects. I lost a relationship in that time too. And that was something that was obviously unexpected. I thought it was going to go super well, but COVID brought, a lot of things to light, and definitely was a magnifier on a lot of things. Also condensed time in a really weird way. Time went by so slow, but so fast at the same time. It was like the Twilight Zone. It was very bizarre. And so I definitely used it as that opportunity to just reconnect with myself, reconnect what my truth really is, and what my voice is, and what I really truly stand for.
Yeah, and you said two things that have stood out to me with 2020 and looking within, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on here to share, because I've been following your journey from afar, and we're both good friends with Sean Wells, who I just had on recently. We talked for like 3 hours about all this, and it
Yeah.
seems to be the people I've surrounded myself with, whether it be the keto community, it'd be the entrepreneurial space, it'd be wherever. It has a fundamental common denominator, I'd say, just looking within rather than what external things can fix me, so to speak, when one of my beliefs is we're all perfect how we are right now. It's just a matter of looking at it differently. And so you said two things. One, I actually heard Gary Vee say this months ago: COVID didn't create anything, it exposed things. And I firmly believe that with anything. Like, nothing is creating a problem, it's just exposing our truths, as you worded it. I love that. The programs we're running that we're not aware of. And that leads into the second thing that you mentioned. I've done a solo podcast on this. I forget what I titled it. It's something like, often what feels good enables the problem. So with, like, coping mechanisms, whether it be food, it'd be the gym, it'd be shopping, it'd be gambling, it'd be porn, it'd be sex, it'd be whatever, substance abuse, it may feel good in the moment, but all it's doing is putting a band-aid on something that's deeper that we often suppress. And then when a moment like COVID and a pandemic happens, where you have to look within, a lot of people, that's not going to be a great thing unless they're in the right environment of people and just their external. But for a lot of people, it could challenge us to look within. And I had the same experience. I learned a lot about myself with a lot of different variables that happened all in the same month, that challenged me to be like, okay, what do I need to learn about myself internally and externally? And like, what do I need to do differently to get to where I want to go? And I want to bring this back to, what I heard you say earlier too, that I took a note of, is vision. And I see that in so many people, whether they acknowledge it or not, they're working towards something. And I know you have a love for neurolinguistic programming. I know you and Sean went to some NLP practitioner trainings, and
Yes.
it's just funny because it was like around the same time that I was finishing up mine. It's a beautiful thing. But what I've learned is, from my reflection of my time with the various things that I've gone through and it's all about vision. And what you described to me, I'm hearing, the environment externally of 2020, of COVID, the pandemic, any obstacle is not as profound as the vision in your mind you're working towards. And I see that with your health, your physical health. You're always optimizing, you're always trying something different, because in your mind, you're working towards something that is not yet. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want to see if you can speak to vision. Has that been something of focus to you? Is this the first time you're kind of thinking of it in that light? Or like, what does vision mean to you in terms of, who you are and what you're trying to accomplish with yourself inside and out?
I think when you are presented with, yourself, right? And if you don't really know yourself super well, either the vision can be super blurry or it can be very skewed. And so you think you're working towards something that you really, really want. And then guess what? Many of us get there and then we're like, this is not exactly how I pictured it to be. And I think it's because we really aren't digging deeper. We aren't going inwards even further. We're not pushing that uncomfortable envelope of like, what if I go and really expose the shadow side of myself? What does that mean? What does that mean in terms, like, for me, for example, one was my spirituality last year. I was so tossed into my face. I was, kind of regarded myself as a Christian. And that was something that was exposed to me that I didn't necessarily believe 100% in, but I had such fear around that, such fear at admitting some of those things to where, like, oh my God, if I don't believe in this, does it mean I'm going to go to hell? But it was something that was inwardly, like, super, super deeply in there, that if it was not tossed in my face the way it was, and my past relationship did kind of expose that, and then I had to dive in deeper, especially with the psychedelics, then I would just kept on going and then just not really taking a look at it. But something didn't feel right. And I think a lot of us kind of do that. We kind of float around and we're just like, yeah, we're crushing it, we're going towards this goal, I'm going to be the CEO of this company and blah 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 blah. And then we get there and we're like, oh, great, this is not what I thought it was. We think that money is going to make us happy. We think that, this type of work is going to make us happy. And then we wonder why it's not, because our vision is blurry. Our vision is skewed. And I'm still trying to clarify my vision. For example, on my profile, like, I've been known as the keto coach, right? Keto coach Stephanie. And that's great. But as I'm growing and as I'm getting to know myself further, I'm developing. And what really feels good to me is an alignment coach, right? And with a focus on keto, like, I'm not abandoning keto completely. But, just having everything aligned, your mind, your body, your spirit, when everything is aligned, then things will become a lot more clear for you. When things are off, your health can be freaking phenomenal. You can look kick ass. You will walk into a room and be like, oh my God, that girl's ripped. And cool, that's awesome. But what they don't see is your mind. Where's your mind at? Where is it? Just down in the dumps? Are you not sure why? Are you battling depression? Are you battling anxiety? What's going on there? Where's your spirituality at? What do you truly believe in? Truly, truly. Because I thought I believed in Christianity 1000%, right? But I was just like, for me, and hopefully this doesn't trigger anyone, but for me, like, I don't believe in the Bible 100%. And now it's been a thing for me and it's been a struggle for me. And I had to dive into that rather than just kind of, I'll just push it aside. I'll keep attending church. I'll keep doing these things that, I don't necessarily resonate with me anymore. And that's okay. So getting that aligned was really important for me. So it's kind of a long tangent on all of that, but having things aligned within yourself further than what you think and diving deeper to really kind of clear up that vision. And I think that vision just, it changes, it evolves as you go on. It doesn't stay the same. And then it gets maybe sometimes very clear. And then sometimes it gets really flippin' blurry. And then you have to kind of wipe the lens off. You're like, what is going on? Let me just put some Windex on this. Like, what? So that's kind of how it was for me. It's been a lot of evolution and a lot of growth. So my vision is still changing.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you just said, and that's been the same experience for me. And why, again, why I wanted you to talk about these things from another perspective, and why I do what I do is to share this, because it seems like you and I are on a very similar path, and it's always so funny. It's not. It's synchronicity. It's just beautiful. But so many things you said that stand out to me directly is one of the things actually I want to say before I forget this is a quote someone shared with me. It's our success in any aspect of life directly correlates with our success with personal growth and development, meaning our mental and emotional pieces. So whether it's physical health, it's career, it's finances, relationships, education, spirituality, like, it all comes back to how much time are you putting into auditing who you are inside and out, and what are you doing to better the parts that you don't really enjoy? There's no right or wrong. Like, that's a phrase that I think people should probably dismiss and think about. What do you want to be true about your life that is not yet true? There's no right or wrong. Just what is, what there is, what there is. What do you want? How can you make that happen? And what you said about vision being distorted or skewed, it's an awesome topic, because oftentimes, and I was challenged with this, like, what do you want, Josh? Like, and I was like, oh, like, I want this. But like, really what I wanted was something far profound than that. But the baggage I had weighing me down was distorting what I thought was possible. And so my mental and emotional makeup led me to saying something that was beneath what I really wanted. And so I love how you put that with vision and alignment. And the what you said about, I used to be a keto coach. Like, I went through the same thing. I started as a health coach, years ago. And then I got into keto because that saved my life. And then all this. And then I was like, I'm putting myself in a box. I'm one dimensional. And there's so many more people I can help if I just remove the word keto. If maybe I've even removed the word coach from my perspective, and I just created new terms. For me, it's the optimization strategist. Like, I love strategizing with people to optimize, like from my BMX career to health and to like, optimization to me resonates. But I love what you said, because you put it as an alignment coach. Is that correct? Is that how you worded it?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I love that, because that doesn't limit your ability to work with various amounts of people, where on the back end, yeah, if they're interested in metabolic health, who better to go to than you? Like, you're helping people get more aligned, and part of that alignment is the physical body. And so I love that you said all that, because that's something that I've gone through the last year or two, is like removing these titles that are one dimensional. People have their own internal representations of, and then they get scared. And that was someone I probably could have helped. But that key word, whatever it was, fill in the blank, push them away. And my job is to lead people out of their fear, through their fear, not into their fear and stay there. So I love that. One thing I want to bring up, I want to get your take on this. You mentioned alignment. Without being aligned, you can't have a clear vision because of the baggage that's weighing you down. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yes. 1000%.
Adding to that, what's your take on identity? Like, what does identity mean to you? And where do you see people getting mixed up with who they believe they are based on their external environment versus who they are internally?
I think your identity will shift as you move on, as you grow. What happens is, of course, culturally, socially, we grow up with whatever's in our family. We grow up with whatever beliefs that we see. Ages 1 through 7, we are just an absolute sponge. So we soak up everything there. And any traumatic experiences are also kind of imprinted there. So we are just absolutely imprinted. And this can be, this life, past life, whatever you want to believe in, it can be passed down genealogically as well. And so as you grow further, and then you start to experiment and you start to try on different quote unquote identities, right? So as a teenager, this is kind of what tends to happen. This is why we're so difficult and rebellious, because we don't want the identity that, our parents gave us. We're different. Except we're trying to blend in with, people at school. And as we go forward now, we're being told, well, these are the steps that you go. You graduate high school, you go into college, you get a 9-to-5 job, you go through your career, you go up the step up ladder. And so a lot of the times that's really pushed on us, right? And so we identify with that, or we find things externally to somehow put ourselves into a box because it's uncomfortable to not be defined, right? And so I think for me, that's been something that has been such an issue, not an issue, but it's been hard because I am so multifaceted. And before, I did not want to be, because he would either run a relationship off, or it would be too much for somebody, or I'm too sensitive, I'm too this, I'm too that. And even in my posture, I would recognize that I made myself smaller by hunching, because I was often told I'm too sensitive, I'm too much, I'm too bossy, I'm too demanding, whatever it may be, right? And so I would identify with whatever people would tell me that I am, rather than, okay, no, this is what I identify with. This is what fits right with me right now. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a year or 2 years or even 6 months or even freaking tomorrow. You can identify as whatever you want, and so it's just digging deep to really kind of see your own world rather than this external world that we're really living in. There's a whole world that's inside of us that a lot of the times we don't explore. It's like giving somebody a video game and you just say, all right, just go through the actual, storyline, but don't go through the side quest. Don't do, character development. Don't do all the fun things, and really kind of dive deeper into that world. And then it opens whole new doors. And then you really thoroughly enjoy the game, rather than like, it was all right, just beat it in 10 hours, but it's actually like 100-hour game. I'm a video game nerd, so sometimes I can make those
No, I love it.
metaphors.
Yeah, I love that. Now, on the note of like cultural and society parameters around identity, being, someone that identifies as a woman and going through these changes and being vocal about them and, putting your feet in the sand and saying, no, like I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that, and being public about it. What's your experience been like that? Because I mean, what you shared, my girlfriend Jackie and like other people I've talked to that are women, especially in business, when they speak up with confidence, that's put down as, oh, they're being emotional. And I have a huge dislike for that, because that's, to me, that person's own baggage being reflected back to them. Because it's like, being confident is a beautiful thing, because I think that's what everyone deep down wants to be and wants to feel. So how has that experience been for you, with voicing yourself in truth and confidence?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We're in such an interesting time right now, because it's a lot more open to that discussion, right? Before, it would have definitely been just poo-pooed, and just that, well, she's just being emotional. Oh, she's on her period, right? We hear that a lot. Oh, she's just PMSing. And, I'm reading an interesting book. The title is a little bit vulgar, or depending on who you're talking to, but it's called Pussy. And it is diving deep into reclaiming your feminism and not denying it. And oftentimes we're told that bleeding is disgusting, and that, our vagina is just gross, and it's just treated as just kind of like, tossed aside. And we're supposed to put our lives on hold for our husbands and our kids. And we're just a mom. And it's really much more than that. I'm still kind of in the beginning of the book, but it's just so interesting how it just takes a deeper dive in reclaiming that word pussy, right? And so a lot of the times, probably your listeners like, oh God, that's really jarring, right? But it's like reclaiming that word, and it can mean so much more than that. And that, females were regarded as, goddesses, 4,000 years ago, or I think it was like 10,000 years ago. It's a lot of years ago, before, the patriarchal system, to where men really dominated, and women, we didn't have any rights. We didn't have a say. We didn't have anything. We're still we're still mutilated today. There's an astronomical amount. I think it's 121 million women are mutilated a year, which is terrible. And it's pretty much right. We have a sex organ, the clitoris, right, that gets removed, and it's purely meant for pleasure. But for whatever reason, they are seeing that as a no-no.
It was an episode of Grey's Anatomy, I think Jackie was watching, where there was a religious family that the doctors were trying to protect the daughter from, that were from, I want to say it was an African country they were from. And that was like what the women went through. It's just tradition. And this
Yes.
young woman wanted to avoid that. And the mom deep down wanted to as well. But the father, being the man and being the voice of the family, and it was like against the religion and this and that. They thought it was like, oh, she's sinning and she's suffering and it's crazy to think that there's so many different ideologies around how to live one's life, and those that are in that family, the traditions they have to go through, even though they don't want to. So I'm really happy you spoke about that. And a funny side note is, there's an energy drink company. I don't know if it's still around, but like 2009, I was in France for a contest, and only in Europe I think this would fly. But the name of the brand was Pussy. It was just, I saved one of the bottles, because it's like I always save things from my trips, and I have it somewhere, but I have to send you a photo of that. But what
That's
you were speaking to
hilarious.
about women being, goddesses, like, it's interesting, because one of my favorite musician artists, Mac Miller, one of his third latest album was called The Divine Feminine, and there was an interview he was talking about, and he was going through this. He was sober for the first time in a while, which he has a long history of substance abuse and depression, and that's what a lot of his music spoke to. But this album was him getting sober, him getting really in touch with love and relationships, and he said something that I was like, that's so true. He's like, women are the closest thing to God. Like, women create human beings. Like,
Hmm.
obviously there's a male involved, there's a sperm,
Mm-hmm.
like, but like coming to the world, like he's like, yeah, it's the closest thing you could ever get to God while being a living human being. So I love that you brought that up. That's what came to mind for me.
Yeah, exactly. And, we are a vessel for creativity, right? Getting in touch with our feminism. And that's really and everyone has feminism and masculinity within them. It's not like this, like, well, if you're a girl, then you're feminine. If you're a guy, it doesn't work
Yep.
that way. These are just different energies, right? That you can tap into, right? And masculine is seen as a little bit more structured, right? In that sense. And whereas feminism is more creative and flowing. And so when you cut us off from our feminism, right, without getting in touch with, our inner goddess per se, you cut off the creative juices from us, right? And so we're not able to then really create what we can create. And it's even in our language when you really think about it. When you call someone a pussy, what are you calling them? Weak, right? So it's that aspect as well. And so it's
super fucked up.
it's really interesting, but it's great because it is taking a different turn.
Yeah, of
We
course.
are shifting that paradigm and that story. It's going to take a long time, and it's definitely going to take a lot of women speaking up for themselves. And you have to also realize that you do still have to play the game. You still have to play according to social norms, but in a way to get your point across without seeming, like, she's just
Emotional or
this,
something.
emotional feminist and blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, how can you really tap into, all right, using the language and really playing the game and whatnot, right? Even like when you're amongst males, for females, if you want to actually assert a little bit of dominance, then you have to speak with the voice from like your in your stomach per se, right? Using the voice down there and deeper in your abdomen versus
To like
talking a
lower
little
the
bit
tone.
more up here in my chest. If I speak like this, then it's going to come off as soft. But when I speak like this, it's going to sound a lot more assertive. And then that way, so it's again, playing the game, right?
And that's the difference of rhetoric too. So I don't want to get into politics because I actually have a vision for the podcast to bring in people that like actually research that. But like just this last year, I've taken a deep dive into politics, and I'll be quite frank, like one of the people that I found a YouTube channel of is an independent media producer. His name's David Pakman. He happens to be from Boston. So right there, I was like, I'm from that area. Cool. But what I've learned from him is diving deep into language, which, us being really into neurolinguistic programming, like that's one of the fundamentals is language, like understanding what's going on. But then there's sensory acuity and like tone and like all body, like all these things. But something that he always talks about is challenging questions, like not challenging the person's truth, but like, cool, how'd you come up with that? And so where I'm going with this was seeing like the election debates, and when is it Kamala? Is that how you say her name? Kamala Harris? Because I
I
know
think
there's like a
so.
big discrepancy of like people incorrectly pronounce her name on purpose, but I think it's Kamala Harris. Yeah, there was something where Trump was like, "Oh, she's just emotional and she's just being this and all," and I was just like, that to me, she had her emotions collected. She was just confident, which I don't think many people or many men in the business world or in politics are used to a woman coming up and just being like, here's my truth. But then also seeing the baggage that a lot of these politicians carry around and it being evident, it's just super sad. But I think that, like you said, it's starting to shift because I see a big gravitation towards language and understanding language, which is why, NLP is getting so popularized. Many people good intentions, many people maybe not so good intentions. That's
Right.
my
With
observation.
anything.
Yeah, just like anything, it can be exploited. But I think that's been the biggest thing between NLP training, watching David Pakman's show. It's just really looking out like to see what's going on beyond the surface level words, but like tone and like body language and like wonder why that person said this. Like, what is their biography telling them right now? And so anyways, that's neither here. This is what came to mind. But when you were talking about like with sex and hormones and all these things, have you heard of Dr. Andrew Huberman?
Sorry, repeat that.
Have you heard of Dr. Andrew Huberman?
Yes, I love him.
So I just got turned on to him this week and I'm already obsessed. So that's just what came to mind because I just started his podcast episode this month he's going in all in the hormones, but he was like, you need to lay a foundation starting with the X versus Y chromosome, leading that into these different biological things. And it's like, it's not so simple of like, oh, if you have an X, you're a woman. If you have a Y, you're a man, or it's like this or that. And like, it's all like, there's so many variables. So I just love that you brought that up, because I think that that's a new understanding wave that's kind of come soon. It's like, especially when we have, you know, the transgender rights and population, like it's just, it's changing the game. But what I see with the hate, my perspective, when I see hate, my instinct now is wonder what happened to that person.
Yeah.
Therefore, they're now coming out with this negativity. Like, what do you see when you know, in that regard, like when you see someone, you know, hating on someone or just any kind of negativity, do you look at like, I wonder what they went through, what they're going through?
Oh yeah. I mean, I definitely, and it takes a lot of self-awareness, right? To do that. A lot of
A lot of
people will just
self-work.
right, a lot of self-work, because a lot of people will just, oh, it's an attack on me, and it's like, it might be their projection on you, right? If, oh, I'm too emotional, I'm too much this. Well, according to whom?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you comparing me to? Is it too emotional for you? Okay, well, what is your lens? Why am I too emotional to you? What happened in your family dynamic to make me too emotional to you? And there's that comparison. Everyone has some sort of center of comparison in their mind, and that's where this comes from. And people aren't many a times open to broadening that. They're just trying to keep it in a box that's safe for them.
Why do you think that
That
is?
I think it's just a better understand. They're just trying to. It's a way to understand other people, and if they don't do the inner work, they don't understand that there's more than just their little own bubble, right? And so they just kind of, instead of, for example, if you're driving on the highway and you get cut off, right? And you're like, F you and F you and oh my gosh, and you just honk the horn, and you're just so. And by the way, I am not a super saint on the highway. I'm definitely getting better. I live in Houston, so it's kind of crazy. But if that
Using it as a
happens,
learning opportunity for yourself.
yeah, it's definitely a learning opportunity. And I have taken many breaths to not go crazy. But if that happens, right, instead of just being automatic angry and like, oh, this guy's, an a-hole. Well, what if he's just cutting you up? Maybe he's, something happened to his dad, right? He's trying to get to the hospital as soon as he can. Or maybe his wife just went into labor and he has to get there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Instead of having those types of perspectives, but you, in your mind, you're playing it as this one story, and it might necessarily be true. And it might be because of what your own story typically is. Maybe you tend to cut somebody off because you're just in a rush and it's your time, and who cares about everybody else, right? And so that's what you compare yourself to oftentimes. So I think it's a really interesting, everyone's world is just a different lens. We all live in the same world, but we all have these different binoculars that we're looking through. And depending on, how much work you've done and how much inner work you've done, it can be very narrowly focused rather than broadening up and being able to see it through almost like a panoramic view.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm finding that I'm getting more and more to the point where, whether it's after the experience or it's like before I say or think something, asking
Yeah.
myself, what about me is choosing to react this way? And so, like the analogy you brought about, someone cutting you off, a friend challenged me this years ago, like, rather than making it about yourself, what does that person have going on? And if you can think that, you can see, like you said, maybe it's a mom with two kids in the back trying to, quiet them down, and she didn't mean it. Like, I don't think people, and that's something that I've come to learn. I don't believe in bad people. I don't believe anyone is genuinely a bad person. I believe people are all doing the best they can with the resources they have at the time. And whether they get onto a substance abuse, they, lash out externally to others, like, deep down, they, if that's what they know to create peace within themselves or to create this escape, like, that's all that they know. And I think our job, I'm speaking for you, but I believe
Hmm.
our
Hmm.
job, what we do, is to share our experiences, our learnings, and our tools to help people understand, like, it's okay. Like, no one's perfect, but if you want to get to the next level of what you want to experience in your life, who, I'm not going to judge that for you or not, like, that's you. But there's some understandings with identity. Is this yours, or did this get passed down to you before you had a choice? Like you mentioned earlier, 0 to 7 years old, we're just modeling. I
Mhm.
think it's like 0 to 12, we're in like a hypnotic brainwave state where we're just absorbing things that we see and we're modeling. Like we don't know. Our prefrontal cortex doesn't finish developing to what, 25, 26 years old.
Right.
We
Yep.
don't know how to
Yep.
logically make sense of what we see. So then we just act. And then we get to a point where we say, I'm depressed, I'm stressed, and I'm this or that. And it's like, no, that's how you feel. You don't
Mhm.
have to, though. But so many of us identify that. And that's where I want to segue this into imposter syndrome, because you and I both spoke to like dropping the keto coach label to now new labels we have that is more congruent with who we believe we are and what we're trying to do. And I know I experienced with leaving the BMX world into the health world. I was like, who am I? Like, I'm just the
Mhm.
BMX athlete. And that took me a while and I got really confident with it. It's like, no, like that was an expression of who I am deep down and the skills that I have and the belief structures I have that allowed me to express myself in that way. Not everyone can do that, but I'm also not in the NBA like I originally wanted to, because my, who I am didn't allow me to be 6 something and be able to dunk and all that stuff. And I wasn't that great at it. So with the note of imposter syndrome, especially getting to the health field, because, like you said, at 2019 Metabolic Health Summit, we met, you were just getting into coaching and things like that. And now transitioning to the world you're in and this new label you created for yourself, so to speak. What has your experience been through the changes of identity and shedding those layers? And like, was there any imposter syndrome? Was there any resistance of, the challenging, like, who am I to do this? I'm not good enough, like things like that?
Oh, 1000%. You know, when you dive into anything new, you're going to have this fear, this doubt, this am I doing this right? Is what I'm doing okay? Like, and then there's this comparison game, right? Because an imposter syndrome, who am I imposter compared to whom? Right? Again, it's just like comparison for me is just the thief of joy. It
Mm,
just robs, and keeps on taking. There is almost nothing to be gained from comparison, depending on who you are. A lot of people use comparison to either push themselves, and that's cool. But, for me, imposter syndrome definitely was a thing, especially because, I was still, and I still am, I still have my 9 to 5 job that I'm working towards, moving maybe somewhere else onto my own. And so that was like, who am I to call myself a keto coach? I've only been doing this for, 6 months, 7 months, but I have such a passion for it. And so the way that I would make up for that, it was by getting certification after certification after
mm.
certification.
Similar. Yeah. Similar
Right?
route.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if I had
External
all
validation.
external validation, exactly. If I have all the certifications, then clearly, I am definitely worthy of, signing up
And
whomever.
did any of it go away after the certifications piled up?
Never. I
Yeah.
don't think it does, until you really just understand that we are all just humans in this collective consciousness creating together. And wherever you are in your journey, there's always going to be somebody better than you. Always. There's always going to be somebody underneath you in terms of maybe they're not that next step of their journey, right? That's where you have the mentor and the mentee.
Hmm.
And the mentor is also going to have another mentor and another mentor, and it goes up and up and up until that one just passes away, and then that one becomes the greatest mentor, right? But even then, we're still learning.
We're still
And
chasing people from the past too. Like
ex,
Buddha,
ex,
for example, like no one's
yeah,
ever going to reach that state.
exactly. And so I think it's just really understanding that just be a student of life, and that you're just learning every single day, and to strive to learn something new every single day, to push yourself beyond your comfort level. And if you don't have imposter syndrome, then maybe you might be too comfortable, right?
Mm,
Because then
yep.
once you get too comfortable in a situation, you think you've got it all figured out. Well, do you? Well, maybe take a look at what's the next step for you. And then you really get humbled. I just started learning Muay Thai, and I love the sport. And I'm probably around 3 months in. And, I was a college athlete, played soccer, scholarship, everything, and then got into weightlifting, been doing that for years. And so I'm well versed in that realm. But man, starting Muay Thai is completely different thing for me. Like even the kicks in Muay Thai are just like worlds different than kicking a soccer ball.
Yep.
And that's something that I had to really learn myself out of and learn into. Kicking with your shin versus with your foot. You kick the soccer ball with your foot. You don't kick it with your shin. It's not really a thing.
Yeah.
So, but that was super humbling experience for me, right? And every day, and it's just like, and it's just comparing myself to last time. Okay, how was I last time? And even then having a little bit of grace on yourself, because sometimes you'll have an off day, right? You're not in it mentally, and not beating yourself up about it, but it's just knowing that I'm going to get better the more that I do this. And that's plain and simple. And then I'm also going to be taught by somebody that's way better than me, and that's how I'm going to learn. We all have mentors and coaches at some point, and if you don't, then you might want to get one.
The greatest
Because
will say that too. Michael
yeah.
Jordan, there's that docu-series he's got out now. Yeah, it's, you're spot on. Like all the greatest of any genre have a coach.
Hmm?
Musicians, artists, athletes, business coaches have coaches. Like I have friends that are top tier business coaches that is, yeah, I just talked to my coach the other day, I worked through this breakthrough. And I'm like, oh yeah, like that makes sense.
Yeah, we don't do so well on our own. We're meant to collaborate with each other. That's why
I
COVID has
hate the
been
phrase
so,
self-made. Like that's
yeah.
one of the biggest scams I think out there.
No, no, no. There's always somebody, there's always a team behind you. There's either or somebody partnering with you,
Or an
or like you said, a
opportunity that was
coach
given to you.
or a mentor or whatever, it's we're never super self-made in that respect. And and that's something that you know, coaches, like you said, coaches have coaches, mentors have mentors, and so forth and so on. And so that's how you're going to learn, is by getting somebody better than you, right, to do that. And as you step into maybe a new role or whatever it may be, you're going to feel like you're not enough, because you're probably comparing yourself to either somebody that you know on Instagram or somebody that you see on Facebook, or your own mentor and coach. You're like, oh God, I'm not good as them. How am I going to step into this role like they've been doing for me? But your perspective and your all of what's made you until this time is completely different than what that particular coach or mentor gave you. So that's so valuable, because your particular perspective can help somebody else that maybe that person could not have ever have gotten to. And that's taken me a long time to realize that the way that I speak to somebody and the way that I can relate to someone is so different than somebody that's also a keto coach, right? And maybe that particular keto coach or whatever type of coach won't be able to really get through with this particular person, but I can, just
Yep.
because of my experiences and what's made me me.
Yeah, yeah, we all have our unique paths and strengths and weaknesses and just stories and journeys, and it all that everything that you just said makes sense. And something I want to bring back to what you said earlier about comparison. I love how you put it. Like comparison is a thief of joy. Like I love that. But what I would say to what you were just speaking about, with a coach creating this fear, the perspective that you spoke to, I would say that would be, and I've gone through this myself. It's like you're choosing, maybe unconsciously, most of the time unconsciously, you're choosing the perspective of, can I do that? Am I capable of that? Rather than looking at that person as inspiration to see what I can do myself, because that person's, and that's one of the biggest misunderstandings I get about who I am and all the things I do. One, oh, how do you not have fear? Oh, that's a big false. And number
Mm-hmm.
two, like, oh, I'll never be able to do that. Like, you're so good. Like, cool. I appreciate the love, and I also want to say I started out not knowing what the fuck I was doing, being in debt, being like depressed and anxious and all these things because I just jumped into it. I didn't know what I was doing. But that's the same way I started my BMX career. I had a vision. This is what I see I got to do. I got to get into it. There was a lot of painful learnings in that, with broken bones, concussions, of course.
Yeah.
But with the business world, it's not that way. It's more mentally taxing. But everyone starts somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And what you said is so powerful, because I don't see it as the problem is comparison. I would say it's how you leverage the direction of comparison. Like you mentioned earlier, are you bettering yourself compared to yesterday? Like if you're comparing yourself to yesterday's version of yourself compared to anyone else, or not compared to anyone else, I think that's a key, because you can look at other people as inspiration rather than judging if you're good enough or if you're capable. It's like, okay, what they look kind of like me, or they're doing something kind of like I am, like I want to do. They must have started somewhere. No one's born into greatness, like, like into like doing things at the top notch. So I think that's in my perspective. You can disagree, of course, if you want, but I would say it's more about comparing yourself to yourself in the
Mm-hmm.
past and auditing, is that serving you and what
Mm-hmm.
you want to be true or not? And then let's look at other people that are doing something similar as inspiration, rather than let our baggage come out and ruin the opportunity we have to be successful to whatever we define that as.
Yeah, 1000%. I think that, often it depends, right? If you're comparing yourself to yourself, and even then having some grace, because in that moment of
Yes.
time, it was just a different time in your life. For example, if I were to compare myself to when I was like, 25, was I skinnier then? Yeah, I was skinnier then, but that's okay. That's not what I'm going for right now. So it's, again, like you said, it's just really kind of, is this, adding value into my life? Is this something that I want to keep? Or is this something that I want to shed and I want to move on from? And I love how you said that, when we see it, if you see it and it's being done, it can be done. A billionaire is just as human as you, as we all are, right? They have the same amount of hours as we all do, right? Maybe their circumstances are different, but it's achievable. And I think it's just having that type of, and pushing past the fear. The fear will be there. That is your ego trying to protect you, or whatever you want to say, keep you down or keep you in a certain place. But it's when you lean into the fear that magic really happens. When you are, okay, I see you, I understand you're there. Maybe you're trying to protect me. I thank you, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to see what happens. And I like to always tell, especially like my clients, what's the worst that can happen? What is the absolute worst thing that can happen? Right? Maybe you're starting keto for the first time and you're like, I don't know about all this. If I invest into a coach and whatever it may be, and it's like, okay, well, what's the worst that can happen? That you learn a couple of things, maybe you lose a couple of pounds, I hardly doubt that you're going to learn nothing from
Mm-hmm.
that. So there's that fear, right? Or maybe you just have the fear of, well, I don't feel like I got enough value for what I invested in. Okay, well, then that's the worst outcome. So is that really worth it then, right? Compared to what you can actually gain from it.
Mm-hmm.
Or quitting your job and going into something absolutely just outside of your territory. You have no idea what the outcome is going to be, and you don't even know what the plan is going to be like. You have kind of a semblance of an idea, but you do it anyways, right? What's the worst that can happen? Are you really going to go on the streets? Are the people that that love you, are they not going to let you sleep on their couch if you come across hard times? It's like those types of scenarios that we really don't play out. We're just kind of playing this like, well, this is what I see, this is what I'm used to. And if I don't have it, then, oh my God, my world is going to come crashing down. And a lot of the times when we don't have the struggles, when we don't have the hardships, then we aren't growing and we aren't going into the person that we can possibly be. It's like pushing ourselves physically in the gym. If you don't go for that last rep and you're literally like, my quads this morning were, I felt like Bambi. I was literally trying to concentrate on not falling. And then even going down the stairs, I was really concentrating on not falling after my workout this morning. But that's because I was really pushing myself. And if you're not, kind of creating that muscle protein breakdown and muscle protein synthesis, it's like, again, it's just that hermetic type of stress, right? Where you're trying to better yourself and you're trying to build on yourself. And sometimes it has to take a little bit of quote unquote destruction for it to be built better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, two questions that came to mind that I like to use in regards to fear is, what is this fear trying to teach me? Like, what is there to learn from this fear? Usually it's protection. Like, okay, something happened in the past. Like, is that the case now? Like public speaking, for example, it's one of the biggest fears, right? And it's like, all right,
Mm-hmm.
well, what are you afraid of? What's the worst case scenario? People laugh at you. Like, is that going to harm you? Maybe emotionally, but where does that come from? And going down that rabbit hole of question loops and all that. But then also what you mentioned is something I like to ask myself and just anyone, just like, do you have evidence of this worst case scenario in your past? Like you said, like for me, one of the biggest breakthroughs I've ever had was understanding like a lot of my shit was tied up in financial fear and limiting beliefs and all that, just from my, past growing up and this and that. And it was like, someone asked me, would you have evidence of ever being broke and on the street? Do you have ever any evidence of ever being hungry? Do you have evidence of ever, whatever worst case scenarios? I was like, oh no. Then what are you afraid of? Things always work out. And as soon as you start to realize that and go all in on using fear as a lever to learn and to push forward, beautiful things happen that you may have not fathomed before. And then your mindset starts to shift, and then your belief structure starts to shift, and then your external world continues to shift in the way you want. And a book that comes to mind, I read this, I think it was 2016, The Power of I Am and the Law of Attraction. I think that's what it is. The power of I am, the statement I am. He talks
Yes.
about being a millionaire multiple times and always being afraid of losing it, and they lost it, and then being afraid of losing it when he gained it and they lost it. And it wasn't until like the fifth time around he was like, all right, rather than focusing on, I'm afraid to lose it, let's focus on how do I maintain it and grow it. And then, he wrote the book years later. And it's such an interesting, simple concept, but because of our emotional body, so to speak, we're trapped in the past until we look at ourselves, we audit ourselves and peel back the layers of our identity and say, cool, well, what do you want? What's that going to take? What is this fear trying to teach you? And so I love this conversation. Clearly I could talk with you about this one
Yes.
thing for so much time, which we'll have to do some follow-up episodes, but I want to bring it back to metabolic flexibility, keto, because we just went through a pretty deep route of language, of identity, of emotions, and, baggage, and just all these things, which is amazing. For me, this journey started because of nutrition. It opened my eyes to auditing things that I was already being taught but wasn't aware of, and then going all in on the mental and emotional pieces of being a human being. So I'm curious, what got you interested in keto specifically? Or was there a stepping stone within the food and health world that led you to keto? And like, how has that evolved in time?
Yeah. So, as a female, definitely done all the diets and everything, but I never had heard of keto. And as I was going through my mini weight loss journey, my weight loss journey for myself after the freshman 20 that I gained, some things were kind of bubbling up for the surface for me in terms of my gut. So I had a lot of gut issues. I had IBS. I was diagnosed with IBS, and when I was trying to figure out what to do with it, I had gone through all of these myriads of different tests and paid a lot of money out of pocket, and I was really young. Um, and so this was really financially one of those things that really hurt. And finally, I was just like, I just can't do this anymore. So I did see, in our good friend Allie Miller, somebody who worked underneath her, and she mentioned that I might want to do a very low carb diet. And I was very reactant to a lot of carbs, all different types of carbs. And so we even did a sensitivity test that she has, and a lot of carbs were listed on there. And I was eating a bunch just because I was really hitting it at the gym. I had really gotten into not really bodybuilding, but just, building muscle and getting stronger. And I had that old mindset and that old mentality of, well, if you don't have carbs, then you can't build muscle. Right. And so when she told me that I had to go under 60 grams of carbohydrates a day, I looked at her like she had three heads. I'm like, how am I going to survive? How am I even going to function at the gym? Is that even possible? And for me, like, I am that person that you tell me to do something, I will always question, always, always, always question. And so I dug a little bit further and I found keto. And I started listening to different podcasts. Leanne Vogel was one that I hopped on early on into keto, and I heard about a lot of the benefits of keto. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to go under 60 grams, I might as well just, cut out the extra 40 and then just go all the way and see what this is like. And I loved it. I mean, my stomach was super flat. And mind you, anything that I ate, I would blow it up like a balloon. It was very uncomfortable. Even though I was thin and muscular, you couldn't really see it. I would still have to hide under, baggy shirts or whatever, or be really mindful of what I ate that day. I was that really annoying person that you took to the restaurant that sometimes you didn't want to invite because that poor waiter. I would engineer my own salad type of thing, and ask 1,000 questions. And so when I went and changed my diet towards a ketogenic diet, I noticed that that was gone for me. And it really healed and enabled me to heal my gut and a lot of issues that I figured out later on that it was because of a lot of lifestyle factors that I had when I was in my teenage years. And also the umpteenth amount of antibiotic rounds, and along with Accutane that absolutely destroyed my gut. So it took me a long time to finally build it back up. And keto was absolutely instrumental in doing so. And that's kind of how I jumped into that and found that.
That one, that's amazing. And two, I didn't know that about working with Ali Miller's team. She's awesome. So I'm glad that that's worked
She,
out for you. And I've recommended her work to a lot of different people, similar experiences that you're sharing and describing. I'm curious, when you dove into keto, you're mentioning like, why not just drop down to 20 grams of carbs, things like that. What was, one of the, if any, what was one of the biggest mistakes that you made or assumed? We'll go with mistake or just a perspective on the keto world. And then what was one of the biggest learning lessons you took away from that?
well, one, calories do matter on keto. You
Yep.
can gain weight on keto. It is definitely a thing.
Who
And
knew?
right. And so that was one of those things. And also, just in terms of everyone's bodies reacts differently. I just found that whenever I was on keto for too long, well, one, I lost my cycle. I was trying to figure that part out. And I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg, because I also went off of birth control at the same time as I went on
Okay. Yep.
keto. So that was a healing process for me as well. And also just pushing it at the gym, I just found that I was kind of plateauing in certain areas, and stress is a thing. And keto can actually make it worse if you're not careful. If you're a very highly stressed individual and you're fasting and you're doing keto and you're doing CrossFit and you're doing all the things, then it could actually work against your body. So those are things that I didn't really quite understand. I just thought push harder, push harder, push harder, restrict more, restrict more, restrict more. And that's not necessarily beneficial and can actually do a really horrific backlash if you're not careful.
Yeah. So let's transition to metabolic flexibility. What's that mean to you, and why do you value metabolic flexibility? Because I know when I asked for some talking points of just things to dive into, that was, I believe, first on your list.
Yeah, so I love metabolic flexibility because it's one of those things where we are able to use two types of fuel sources, fats and carbohydrates, right? So lipids and lactate. And what I found is that whenever I was ketogenic for too long, then I was not able, I just hit just a plateau at the gym, like I mentioned before. And then when I added carbohydrates back into my diet, I noticed that my body shifted. I actually began to lose a little bit of weight. I actually also was able to push it further at the gym, which probably helped with calories in, calories out, right? And that type of mindset. And then also my hormones started to level out whenever I did that. And so because our bodies are able to use both sources of fuel, I believe that we should be able to use both sources of fuel. And often in the keto camp, it's just like you say keto 365, 24/7. Oh my God, carbs are the devil. And it's like, well, our bodies actually are primarily, primed to run off of glucose. That is the primary source of fuel. And then the backup system is, ketones, right? So there is a reason why that is that way. So why not tap into that? But also, we are not meant to run on carbohydrates 24/7, 365 also, right? On that regards. So then we're also meant to go through periods of fasting. We're also meant to go through periods of not having a lot of carbohydrates and relying more on fats, and also relying on the fat on your body as a source of fuel. So tapping into that ketone production. And I think whenever we're in one camp for too long, then our body starts to go awry. Right. And so that's where I like the term metabolic flexibility, is because we are flexible in utilizing both sources of fuel at any given time, depending on what your goal is. Right. For example, if you are really more into that anaerobic type of workouts and you're really trying to do HIIT, well, then maybe some carbohydrates around your workouts probably going to help you to push yourself at the gym a little bit more. But at the same time, I'm trying to say and more than but,
Yep.
and you are, you have to be able to utilize those carbohydrates efficiently to be able to do that. So then a lot of the times, maybe a lot of people aren't able to do that. right? So they are oftentimes insulin resistant. They're not able to utilize carbs efficiently. And so that's where keto can come in and really help with that insulin sensitivity, and for you to be able to actually utilize carbs when you do need it. It's a tool. It's not something to be shied away from.
Yeah, I love that. I love it because it's what I speak to today. It's keto can be an amazing tool. There's a very small minority of people that it has to be their lifestyle. I think you met my good friend Miles, Keto
Hmm.
Mammoth. He's
Hmm.
really tall.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
he found out when his glucose numbers get to a certain point, when his ketone numbers drop to a certain point, it triggers a seizure. So
Right.
he's one of the people that maybe can't get away with higher amounts of carbohydrates even if he's working out. Or I know he tried like a higher protein approach and that was not doing so well for him, or just even certain sugars, even just a minuscule amount. So there is context. And so I think what you and I are speaking to is the vast majority of people that are interested in keto for weight loss, or performance, or even the brain. That's where I came from. It wasn't a weight loss journey that led me there. It was brain health and performance. So there's
Exactly.
a lot of context there. That's why I appreciate what you do and what you just spoke to, because I believe metabolic flexibility is the ultimate goal
Hmm.
with using a low carb ketogenic approach for the vast majority of people. Because once you do, you can play with it. You can, go times where you can fast and not get hangry. You can be creating ketones, and then you can implement carbohydrates at certain times of the year, certain times of the day, and enjoy certain foods. Or you just have the freedom that if you want to eat that piece of cake, or if you want to have that drink or those drinks one day, you have these systems in place to where your body can handle it, and then you can just get back on track. I think that's the ultimate goal. I know Mark Sisson talks a lot about that. It's like enjoying your life, not being so dogmatic. And he's like, some people will like get all on me when I have a little piece of bread, at dinner or something, or I put a little bit of sugar in my coffee. He's like, but I do all the work to be able to have that freedom, and that's just one small portion of my day or my life. And so I
Exactly.
love that.
Yeah, and that's kind of the role that I've been living by, and that's not something that I just stumbled up, or I had to stumble upon, right? Or I had to kind of work through, because as I went into my keto journey firsthand, I was dogmatic about it, right? I mean, there was just like, oh no, I'm not touching that, ketchup, oh my God, or anything like that. It's just like I had to really remain in ketosis, and I would be absolutely dogmatic about my keto numbers, right? And like you mentioned before, some people have to do it in order to maintain, a certain level of health or whatever it may be. But for me, it was just purely of like, I wanted to feel good and I wanted to look good. But for whatever reason, I was like, why am I not at a 0.5? Oh my God, this had to have kicked me out of ketosis. And I was stressing myself out because my keto numbers weren't at a certain level. And it's like, I'm not epileptic. I don't have to have a certain amount of ketones in order to function throughout the day. It's just, I need to just live my life, just like you said. And a lot of the times, guess what? Stressing out about those ketone numbers will actually kick you out of
Yeah.
ketosis. So it's like a weird catch 22. And I was so diving into that. And then finally, I mean, orthorexia is a thing. And if you're not too careful, you can really go off the deep end as to being too healthy, and then your body will not be able to respond to, like, if you do want to have like maybe even a bite of cake, your body will respond in a way that you're not going to like it. It's going to be very unenjoyable for you. And unfortunate, well, not even unfortunately, but it's just a nature of reality
Mhm.
that culturally, socially, it evolves around food. It's just one of those things. And if you want to be able to enjoy being social, enjoy being around your family and whatnot, and be able to kind of quote unquote let your hair down without the guilt. That's like the biggest part, right? Without guilting and shaming yourself afterwards or going on a binge, and just being able to have a piece of cake or have a piece of a chip or whatever it may be that is your thing, then you can. And I learned that after, few years of, doing this work, that my body is able to handle it because I'm putting in the work to do it. And, adding in the carbs, I figured out that my body likes to do it in terms of the cyclical approach, not in a weekly or even bi-weekly, but a monthly,
Mhm.
right? Almost like seasonally. So winter, my body loves to be in ketosis. It loves in that way. I'm trying to shift it a little bit because, well, that's, also Christmas and seasonal stuff. So I'm just like, sometimes I want to enjoy those things too. So And I'd much prefer to be a little bit more ripped in the summer than in the winter when I'm just wearing a bunch of clothes. But I have started to shift that a little bit in terms of I like to be in keto 3 months, 2 to 3 months on. And then I like to be a lower carb about 1 to 2 months off. And so I'll cycle in and out like that. And then I will shift my workouts accordingly as well. Right. So I'll really start to push at the gym, either for strength or hypertrophy in those times, and type into those more glycolytic pathways. And so I can utilize those carbs. And sometimes if you're not careful, if you remain ketogenic for too long, you might not be as efficient as utilizing those carbs that are being introduced into your body. It can take you a while to get back that, kind of that sensitivity of you uptaking that glucose.
Yeah, and something you spoke to, like the guilt and the shame, like in recent years, that's been something that I got really clear about myself that I never saw, maybe didn't want to see. That like, oh, I had, like I had whatever it was that was not keto. Oh, I gotta feel bad about it. I gotta hide it. I remember when I was in Whole Foods. I live in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, and Dr. Eric Westman's out here at Duke. And I ran into him at Whole Foods one day in my cart. I had my thing is always like, I'm gonna treat myself. It's typically like real food. It's like sushi or it's like pizza from Whole Foods. That's like one of my guilty pleasures, even though it's still real food, somewhat processed. But I had 2 slices in my cart and I was just like, what's up, Dr. Westman? Like, good to see you. And now I'm just like, I don't give a fuck. Like I know the work I've done. I understand. But something also you spoke to, the numbers. I didn't know like what I was being so dedicated and strict. Why are my numbers dropping in terms of ketones? I didn't know that's a good thing because of keto adaptation and my body's actually utilizing them more efficiently. And then the context, like, did I just work out or am I stressed or things like that? So it's like, there's so much context to this world that is keto that I find it's easy for people to get polarized in it because of ignorance, which isn't, right or wrong. I'm not saying like, you don't know, like what, it's just, that's why we do what we do, is to educate, because it's saving people the headache that we had to learn the hard way. To now we can share that with other people to make their life more efficient and enjoyable. And so I love that you said that, because that for me in recent years has become very evident in myself and other people. And the more I can be transparent about what I do, and I'm very clear about discipline equaling freedom. For years, I tracked in a notebook before I knew about apps. I did this, all my macros, the times I ate, all my numbers of blood and this and that. And then get to a point where I was like, I've done the work long enough. I look good. I feel good. Why am I being so strict and stressing myself out to where it's voiding all the work I'm doing, essentially, because it's still taxing my health. And so I think that that's an amazing point to bring up, that I think anyone listening to this should take away. Like, it's okay to be strict at times, especially if you're focused on a goal. But the ultimate goal with metabolic health, I would assume, and I would argue for most people, it's metabolic flexibility, not stressing yourself out and having the foods that you enjoy with parameters around them, so they're healthier, or let's say more beneficial for your health and your goals, and not being so polarized on this is good or bad. It's like, well, what's the context? Like, that's key.
Exactly. And, I always tell my clients, it's like, you don't have to do anything. I'm not going to be there with a gun saying that, well, my God, if you have that piece of cake, I will shoot you. It's not, that is not a thing, and it's one of those things where it's making the decision that is going to help you towards your goal, right? Is having that piece of cake going to help you towards your goal?
Is it aligned?
No, right?
With
Is it
your
aligned?
outcomes?
Exactly. Ooh, I love that. Yes. Is it aligned with your outcomes? And it's one of those things where if it's not, okay, well, then you're making the decision, the empowered decision to have that cake, regardless of maybe it's detrimental to your goals, right? Depending on what the context is. Or it could be one of those things. Well, if I have, half a cookie right now, and instead of delaying like this, just like absolute, I am just obsessing about having this freaking cookie. And then a week later, you binge on 10 cookies. I'm going to rather you have that half a cookie than 10 days
See, I
later.
want to push back
10
on that for
cookies.
me, because I'm the type of person that rather than like lingering out the amount of cookies I'd eat, I'm the type of person that's like, I'm just going to eat all of them now. I'm gonna do a fasted workout tomorrow, maybe add in some exogenous ketones, and then I'm gonna do like a day or two of just like straight up carnivore and then get back into a ketogenic state. Like that's where my mind goes. Cause like I know from my past with like how addicted to sugar I was, like I used to eat, like it's funny that people like they think they know where I came from with food. I keep talking, Ryan and I are talking about this. We need to do a day in the life of us 10 years ago with a
Yeah.
continuous glucose monitor and brain
Oh,
scans and all this
God.
stuff, but like to see how toxic it was. Cause I'm in the mindset, it's like, around holidays and stuff, like my biggest, I love cheesecakes. Like for my birthday, I'll get a cheesecake or Jackie will make one, whatever. And like, I'd rather smash those calories in that sitting, do a fasted workout, which I love fasted work. I prefer to work out fasted and then get back on track with these systems in place. I have some berberine, thanks to Sean for the teachings of that. Like that's where my mind goes, but I know my brain and I know if I have a cookie today, I'm going to want 5 more tomorrow. And then I'm actually probably going to eat those 5-10 minutes later. And then I'm going to feel guilty about it. And then I'll be like, well, fuck it. Like now I'm going to torture myself. I'm going to fast for 2 days after that, which isn't the best thing after spiking your glucose. So it's like, that's where my mind goes. I'm not giving that as advice. That's not what I advise, but that's where I've learned about myself. It's like, let's just get rid of those calories now, get back on track. That works for me. I actually do that once a month, usually in the form of pizza.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on who you are, right? You have that more kind of like that extremist type of black or white mentality where it's like all in or all out.
I guess that comes from my athletic career too.
Yes, because I definitely have the same issue a lot of the times is I'm all in or all out. I'm very black and white. If I'm gonna have this, I can't have half a slice. I'm gonna just might as well have the whole thing. It's right here. I don't know. When is the next time I'm gonna have another slice, right? I might as well just do it now. Right. But again, it's kind of like pushing past that uncomfortable portion of like, okay, can I do this? This is a challenge for me. Can I just have half and be okay and see?
Food is one of the biggest challenges that I create for myself. And I think that's what people open their eyes, what you said before, like it's everywhere in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes the biggest challenge, whether you like it or not. But when you can actually challenge yourself with games with food, like 90 days, I'm not going to eat anything of a starch or a sugar unless it's sweet potato or carrots or fruit. Like in 90 days, I'll see if I want to have that, whatever your choice is. It's not like often it's not even worth it. Like you get to that point, and you're like 90 days, great. I had a client couple that did no alcohol for 90 days. They got to 90 days. I was like, you guys gonna have a drink? They're like, no. They ended up going a year.
Yeah.
And then and it was like this whole transformation. So it's just funny because I love challenges and I always use food as a challenge. And lately, now that I'm like not so wrapped up in guilt, those challenges are more fun because I'm like, oh, I actually don't even want that. Like this weekend did that. I had arepas actually. Have you ever had arepas?
Never
Look
heard
them
of
up.
it.
They're like I think it's spelled Arepas, arepas. They're a South American food. My friend from Argentina, he brought me to a local spot out here. They're like, it's a corn flour. It's
Is
like,
it arepa?
yeah. So I'm mispronouncing. I'm typical
Oh,
white
yeah.
American pronouncing it. Yeah.
Sorry. I was like,
But yeah,
I think I
they're amazing. And that's, to me, that used to be like a guilty pleasure because it's not keto. But in actuality, the carbs are probably still less than 100 grams, depending on if I eat 3 rather than 2. But berberines right in my back pocket, so I know I'm good in my
I
lifestyle.
love berberine. Yeah, that is something that I definitely like tell my clients, especially towards like the later end of our coaching. And I'm actually developing a program on how to introduce carbohydrates. They're like life after keto exists type of thing. Yeah,
awesome.
and how to do it in a more intellectual way so that you're not gaining all the weight back. But it's funny because it's just you're really just trying to instill habits, right? And mindset shifts because that in the long run is going to keep the weight off for those that are really looking towards this journey for weight loss. Because unfortunately, 90% of the people that go on a diet will gain it back within 5 years. 90% is depressing. So but it's an actual statistic. And
the community of diet still thrives today. It's amazing.
Because people want the quick fix. They want the easy route. They want the 30 days. I want to lose it and I want to lose 10 pounds in 30 days, right? They don't want to do the long game. And for example, I have a client who, she's getting a little bit frustrated because she plateaued for 2 weeks.
In
And
2 weeks, in my mind,
yeah,
I'm like, that's not a plateau, but okay.
exactly. She plateaued into, well, I haven't seen anything move, and she doesn't have a lot to lose. But it's one of those things where she wants that number to move. She wants that instant gratification. And so instead of just, hey, well, let's just see, write it out a little bit longer, see if it moves. She wants to move the needle now. So, okay, well, let's implement fasting. Let's implement more things. But, it's one of those things where I know what the client needs. And a lot of the times it has to also be what the client wants, right? We both have to be on that level of mutual agreement. But what most people need is just more time. Just
Hmm.
give it more time, and also really understand your mindset behind it. Why are you binging? Why on the weekends are you ruining your progress from the whole week? Oh, I've been good this whole week, but man, on the weekend, I don't know what happened. I just kind of fell off the wagon. So I'll get back on it this week. Well, that's cool, but that's probably not why the needle isn't moving, because you're intaking all the calories that you've been trying to lose and offset into that one weekend. So yeah, your weight's not going to budge. You're not going to go anywhere.
Hmm.
Okay, well, let's dive deeper. Why is that happening? For example, I had a client, she, on the weekend, she would have some carbs, tortillas, and then just have a lot of chips and whatnot. I'm like, okay, let's dive a little bit deeper, right? Then focusing on like, well, really just try and focus this weekend on not doing that, right? Sorry, my headphones went out.
Oh, there you are.
And so really focus on, okay, why are you making these decisions? Is it because you've been good all week and you're looking at the weekend as a treat? Or is it because, and we really found out, it was because she was tired and the weekend was her time of rest. And so she saw carbs and whatnot as almost like relaxing. And so finding other methods of relaxing was really key for her not to binge on the weekends, right? And really diving into, well, can you go to the spa? Can you drop off your kids? She's a teacher and a single mom during COVID. Okay. This woman has a lot of stress in her life and she has
Yeah.
a lot going on, and she's trying to do all of these different modalities of trying to lose weight. And so that was something that we implemented, and she had no idea that was the reason why that she was kind of digging into the chips and the tortillas, not being able to say no to that. It was because she looked at it almost like relaxing.
100%. Yeah, that's a great find. And to what you were saying earlier about the time piece, when a client of mine is like, this isn't happening quick enough, I'm like, cool. Well, one, like, what was the time expectation you had in your mind? Okay, cool. Well, why can't this happen how it's happening now? Like what's going on in there with that rush, that impatience. And then we find out there's a deeper rooted cause to the impatience that stems from the past. And then as soon as they accept it and let it go, enjoy the ride. Oh, hey, that stall that you had for those 2 weeks all of a sudden went away the next week or something, because all that stress is being
Mm-hmm.
hung on. And, in NLP, we call it baggage, but it's like
Yep.
as soon as you let go of that shit, your load lightens up and you feel more free in yourself, especially if you have the pieces of context you added of like, food being such a comfort thing, such a reward system, and, just relaxation. It's like there's other like, one, that's neither right or wrong. Here's
Mm-hmm.
what you said you want. My job as a coach is to challenge you. So are there other ways to get those things that you're lacking as a human need, basic human need, beyond food? Oh, yeah, there's this, there's that. Or are you doing those? No. Could you do those? Sure. Why don't you do that? And like you had the success that you were mentioning. So it's just a beautiful thing to be able to like, that's why everyone needs a coach. Like everyone needs a third party that's not emotionally biased to your subjective reality. And that's why I have a coach. And that's why I speak about there's difference between coaches and theory,
Right.
coaches and mentors, because a mentor will tell you they learned from someone else. Anyone can go read or take a course and then teach it. But I would argue, are you doing that yourself? Did
Mm-hmm.
you do what you're saying you can help me with? And do you have accountability on your end? That's a difference. And I think that's why you're so successful. And I'd be interested to see how long until you're doing this full time and not work, unless you love your 9 to 5. I don't know. I'm not going to project my opinions on you, but it seems like you would rather do this stuff full time. And I think it's just a matter of time before you do that and you're thriving at that, because you're able to help so many people because of your experience and all the things you talked about that led you to where you are today. And that's something I've gone all in on. I have a few different certifications. I don't have them anywhere. I don't talk about it. I think they're like stuck in my closet over there. Like
Yep.
that to me, like I love how Eric Thomas, you familiar with Eric Thomas, the hip hop
Mm-hmm.
preacher, motivational speaker?
Mm-hmm. Oh
He
yeah.
said, he's like, I didn't go to school to get the PhD to get the certification. I just went to, I need the how did he word it? Like I needed the codes to play the game. Like I just needed the skills to play the game.
Right.
That resulted in me getting a piece of paper. And I found out for me, I did a podcast about this. I was like, I had so many insecurities I was covering with those external validations
Mm-hmm.
of not being good enough. And I just
Mm-hmm.
needed this piece of paper to prove it. And funny, like I stepped into that truth and that confidence. It's been years since someone's asked me about like, oh, how are you qualified to do this? Because, with language, we speak to people and our stories demonstrate our ability to serve someone. And it's like, we've been to the top of that mountain. I can bring you if you want to go. It may look different for you, but I know how to get back on track for you. And you just tell me where you want to go. We'll go there. Just like a GPS in the car. Oh, we took a little detour here. Here's how to get back on track. And I see that with you, and adding in the elements of the mental and emotional piece, and then the metabolic flexibility, the keto, and all these things. I'm really stoked for you. I'm stoked for anyone
Thank
that
you.
works with you, and I'm excited to see where you continue to grow.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited too. It's been what's really interesting is that so much has shifted for me in just 8 months. So I can't even tell you what it's going to be like next year. And I have an idea of when I might go off on my own.
Awesome. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. And, but it's one of those things where it frightens the crap out of me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to lie. It is very scary to walk into something that is unknown, that you haven't done. And you've been preached your whole life that your 9 to 5 is your safe haven. And my parents are very safe. Okay. So like this terrifies them. The fact that, I might go off on my own. And it's just one of those things where I have to trust myself. And I think that's the biggest thing. And that's one of the things that I definitely teach with my clients is how to trust yourself and how to listen to yourself and how to navigate yourself. Again, with the alignment, having everything aligned and making sure that all your truths are there and present in this moment. They can change, but so much can happen in just a spick and span of a little bit of time. And so I tried to have that vision, but be flexible, right? I think when we're so rigid is where we can get into a lot of trouble. But when we're flexible and when we're malleable and when we are kind of like a sponge and we're just ready to soak up whatever comes our way, then I think that's when a lot of amazing and beautiful magic can really happen.
I agree. And on that note, the last thing I want to ask you is if there's any 1, 2, or 3 simple steps anyone can take to move forward with the information that we've talked about, whatever resonates most with you that you think would be most valuable. What are like 1 to 3 practical things someone can start doing today to learn more about themselves and figure out where they truly want to go?
I would definitely say one of my top ones is get a coach or a mentor. Get somebody who's a step ahead of you and get someone who's outside of you. Because unless you have that perspective, you're in your own perspective and you're not going to be able to really kind of see the whole panoramic, right? You see that really narrow, focused vision. And so it's just getting that outside perspective that's going to help. And then 2 is just explore. Really, just look at it as an experiment. This whole thing is an experiment. And when you kind of treat your life as that, then you kind of shed a little bit of the fear. Still be there, but you shed a little bit of that fear of just like, okay, well, if this doesn't work, that's okay. What's like the worst thing that can happen is I learn. Awesome. And so it's really just like that. And with anything, right? It can be a diet. You're experimenting with keto. Well, then experiment with it and see what happens. If you're experiment with weightlifting, do it, see what happens. If you're experimenting, and obviously do your research with a lot of these things and go with with people who are well versed in it. It could be psychedelics, the same thing. Do your research, explore, and treat it as that. And don't be so regimented. Be flexible. That's another thing too, is that once you find yourself being so dogmatic, or you find yourself being super, super comfortable in an area, maybe take a look and see what are some areas that you can start pushing yourself and push the envelope. Maybe it might be a little bit uncomfortable. It can be as simple as to even taking a cold shower, right? There's benefits to that, right? And that can be that's the smallest step and the easiest free step that you can take. Is just pushing your body in that regards of, can I do a full 5-minute cold shower? And depending on where you are in the country, it might be lukewarm. For example, Texas right now, it's a little bit lukewarm, but it's just pushing yourself and really proving to yourself that you can do it, and giving yourselves those positive examples of, oh, I did do this, I can do this, right? Rather than the latter, and believing the story that maybe hasn't even been told yet.
Awesome. I love that. I agree with all that. And I want to say thank you for your sharing your time today, for your sharing of your wisdom and your story. And just really grateful to have this moment with you. And I'm excited to see when we can hang out in person again and get to hug one another and get to be around all the other great people in this space, and just keep doing what we're doing to help empower other people and continue to change some perspectives and ultimately change some lives.
Yes, I am all in for all of that. Thank you so much for having me on here. It's been such a blessing to even know you and to even go on this path with you. And I can't wait until we're together again too, one day, hopefully soon.
Yeah, sounds good. And yeah, it's my pleasure having you, and I'll be talking to you soon. So thank you.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it.